Around the year 1020, there is a bishop in Würm, Germany. The Burchard of Würm wrote a book of canon law, and he included in it a document that was called Corrector sive medicus, that has some very interesting testimony about this goddess of the witches. And so first, he's denouncing the widespread folk belief in shamanic women who ride on certain animals on special nights in the company of, quote, she who common folly calls the witch Holda, along with a throng of demons transformed into the likeness of women. So a couple things are going on here. Number one, instead of calling the goddess of the common people Diana, he's saying that they call her Holda, or the witch Holda. We don't know if that's his word or theirs. So that connects with a vast body of traditions about the goddess Holla, who remains in German folklore to this day, and we'll see more about her. The other part of this is he's saying these aren't really women that are flying with the witch Holda, but they are demons who are made to look like women. So there's already starting to be a shift in the way the priesthood approaches this. And one of their positions to say none of this is real. It doesn't really happen, and it's all illusions of the devil. So that crystallizes into canon law, into a law that's called the Canon Episcopi, the bishop's rule. And it reads like this: certain abandoned women, perverted by Satan, seduced by illusions and phantasms of demons, believe and openly profess that in the dead of night they ride upon certain beasts with the pagan goddess Diana, with a countless horde of women, and in the silence of the dead of night fly over vast tracts of country and obey her commands as their mistress. So this is the distillation of legends that have been concentrated, reworked really, by the priesthood of the goddess, and now they're saying it's all illusions of the devil, and there is no goddess really, it's only the devil. This was the doctrinal approach of the clergy over many centuries. There is no goddess, Diana is the devil, and they were sticking with that story. The common people weren't buying it though. So then we have a whole body of ethnic names for the goddess, in whose retinue flew the witches, ancestors, and land spirits. And this is in the folk tradition of many countries. And so in northern German-speaking countries, she's Holla or Holda or Frau Holt. This is all names for the beneficial and the kind one. Or she is Berchta or Perchta or Perchta, Berta, all from a word meaning brightness, brilliance. And she becomes a goddess of the winter nights in particular. And then in France, from Latin abundia, abundance, she becomes Lady Habonde, Dame Habonde. Diana, of course, continues to be used, but that name tends to migrate. People stop using it, if they ever did, because it was dangerous. And so the common Italians came up with new titles for their goddess. And so she's called Signora Oriens, Lady East, or Signora del Buon Gioco, Goddess of Good Play. And there's a bunch of other names. Epifania, which is the name of the Feast of Epiphany, but it's also the end of the winter nights, the 12 nights after the solstice, the winter solstice. That eventually, on the tongues of the common people, becomes Befana or Befania, another form of the old goddess. Then we have Verelda in the Netherlands, who gets eventually, on clerical tongues, turned into Faraildis, or sometimes Farelis, name that's associated with witches' flying ointments in one German text. Nickniven simply means the daughter of Ben Nevis, the tallest mountain in Scotland. This mountain association we'll see examples of. And then the Geierkarling, the old woman, and the Geier is a word that involves turning. It's associated with spinning. So these are just a few examples, and there are not a lot of pictures of these beings. They're written about, or they're in the folklore. The ethnographers mention them. But I made this map just to track not just any goddess, but goddesses specifically associated with a retinue of pagan spirits and witches and ancestral beings that fly especially on the old pagan holidays, as well as in storms. So in Scotland we have Nickniven and the Geierkarlen, or the Queen of Elfheim, the Fairy Queen, Queen Mab, Nokti Luka, the light of the night. We have the Una and Anya and Mongfin as names that are in the folklore of Ireland, and Gururisa or Raisarova in Scandinavia, Holda, Hola die Holt, Frau Holt, so that's northern German regions. And then in eastern France, there's Tante Ari, who was a fairy woman associated with serpents. And in the Basque country, there is Mari and her many titles, Amaitagari and other titles. Sometimes she's slipped over into the saints, so we have a Santa Comba in the Galician region of Spain. And then Italy itself, I've given you some of those names already, but Aradia comes into view. We also have Sibylla. We'll see examples of these as we go along. And there's quite a few names in Eastern Europe. So I talked before about Zina, the form of Diana that was current in Romanian folklore, or the Lady of the Fairies, Doamna Zinilor. Sometimes you'll see Erodiade, or Iliana, or Cosinziana, who is kind of a solar brilliance goddess of nature. In the Hungarian world, there is Shepasonye, which is the fair lady, also alias Saint Luca. And then we have various forms of old women. So there's the Petra Baba, the Zlata Baba, the golden old woman, Quaternitsa, and various other forms that are there in the Balkan region. Going way off to the up to the northern Baltic countries, Latvia and Lithuania, we have Laima or Laime, who means good fortune. And then, of course, there is the Baba Yaga in Russia and Ukraine, as well as Kostroma, who is a somewhat demonized flax goddess, very witchy goddess, and a fairy woman, all-wise Yelena. So those are some examples of these traditions. And then the journey of the people who go with the goddess, especially the women who go by night with the goddess, we have the wild ride of the spirits, and often these are ancestral beings. And so we have names for this ride, which is called in Norway Ascareda, lightning thunder. In Italy they call it the Tregenda. Aquelarre in Basque, so that means goat meadow. The Meni Hiliaken in France, the Harlequins horde. West Antigua in Spain, this means the ancient army, or the wild host. These are the forms of the same concept. Walpurgisnacht in Germany, very often on the pagan holiday of May Eve. The Hallowmass rite in Scotland, and a lot of Halloween traditions around this. And then another phrase, andare in corso, to go the course, or to travel the course. That is one of the many phrases that the Italians have. And where are they going? Often there's a destination that is a sanctuary of nature. Very often it's a sacred witch mountain, often the very highest mountain in the country. So in Germany it's the Blocksberg or the Brocken, sacred to Frau Holla, the Horselberg. In Sweden it's the Blåkulla, the Spakonafell in Norway. This means the dale of the prophetic woman. Let's say the veil of the prophetic woman. And so that you can read, there's various other examples there. Mount Kshatriya in Lithuania, and Ben Nevis, that's Nicknevin in Scotland. These are interesting. Knoknahia, the hill of the fairies, that's an Irish phrase, but there's almost a total correspondent to this in a different language in Auvergne, where they call it the Puech de Elve, the elves' hill. And then you have various other names, including kind of a more literary form, the Venusberg. So again, they're Romanizing the names. And so witches were said to fly together to all of these gatherings in order to have a ceremony on the mountaintop and dance and feast and do pagan things. So bits of this survive into a poem called Le Roman de la Rose. This is at the end of the 1200s. And Jean de Meun says, many people in their folly believe that they are taken wandering with Dame Habonde, and say that all over the world Every third child is in this condition. They go 3 times a week as if destiny had led them to it. So the idea that certain people are fated to go on this spirit journey with the goddess. So when they say every third child, they give it as le tiers pas de nation or le tiers enfant de nation, every third child born in the country. This descends from Bishop Rotarius several centuries earlier, where he's talking about a third of the country is under the rule of Diana. And this meme continued along, was born along in the writings of the priesthoods, but it also becomes part of folklore. A third of the people are dedicated to this witch goddess. So the wild hunt, the ancient army, the fairy host, and you have various modern paintings representing this tradition. But what happens is the goddess gradually, by the theologians and the witch judges, gets turned into the devil. And so instead of a divine woman, you have here the devil painted in red as in the garb of a mercenary soldier. And so they're crafting demonological myths that are drawing on actual folk traditions, but they're changing them because they're editorializing massively, and they're actually most concerned about demonizing these folk goddesses. And so it has to be a male devil, and then he in turn is made into a dominator over the witches.